Today's episode is a doozy. I have the pleasure of chatting with Brooksand Camper, and you get to listen in. So, Brooksand has had such an interesting life, and it's fun to hear her story. It's also, though, really great to hear about why she does what she does. So, Brooksand has an online sewing course, actually, three of them, where she teaches students how to take their own unique body and make patterns directly for their body, not for anyone else's body, not using any kind of industry standards, just physically taking their own body and their own preferences and making what they love. She didn't start out as a sewist, though. She started out working in theater. And she has a really fun little story about how she went from being on the set design to learning how to sew and being in the costume show. She shares her story and how she got to where she is. But the majority of our conversation is about why she does what she does and what lights her up and how she chooses a slow, process driven life to create a life that works really well for her. And I have to tell you, I was so inspired when I talked to Brooksand. We have a lot of similarities, to be honest, and I just adore her. But there are some ways in which we're distinctly different. And I found so much inspiration in those differences. And as happens really when I talk to anybody on the podcast, I'm able to take that and look at my own life and think, what kind of elements of that do I want to incorporate in my life? Because that sounds really great. And so I think you're going to have a really great time listening to this conversation as well. So let's get started. You are listening to the In Kinship Podcast, a podcast for makers who crave an authentic, vibrant, sweet life on their own terms. Today's episode is sponsored by Howl at the Loom. Howl at the Loom is headed up by Jasmine Petrie. And Jasmine is a weaver in northern Michigan. She has been for about 10 years, and she prioritizes locally grown and processed fibers and upcycled materials. She has a passion for spreading her love of textiles. And on her website, you can see what kind of classes she teaches and the work that she does. You can find out more about Howl at the Loom at HOWLATTHELOOM.com. So I'm here with Brooksand. Welcome, Brooksand.
Hi, Tina. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's exciting to have you. I have long admired your work and admired your sense of humor that you are able to put through on your social media and your blog posts. And I have always known that we probably would be good friends if we lived near each other. So I am very excited to have you on the podcast today and to talk to you and get to know you a little better.
Well, thanks for having me. I feel the same. I feel like we should be friends, and even though this is the first time we've actually talked to each other before.
Exactly. So let's begin by getting into a little bit about who you are and your background. I know that you've done some amazing blog posts. So if somebody hears something of interest, which they're going to, they should check out your blog, which is on brooksand.com, and they will read all about your interesting and exciting pathway into sewing. Maybe you could share with us a bit about your background as far as your technical sewing, but then also let's talk a little bit about how you identify as a maker or if you identify as a maker. So tell us a bit about yourself, if you will.
Yes, I identify as a maker, so I can start there. And I guess that is the one through line through everything. Like as a kid, would say that I was a maker, and through high school and stuff. So my main way of making these days is sewing, and I do custom sewing. So it's only for individuals. I don't sew anything, for mass production, and I don't work with mass produced patterns or anything. I just do this like intimate little process, just me and an individual. So that's what I make as a maker, although I like to make everything. Um, but when growing up, I, just dabbled in lots of stuff, and I went to college for theater, and I loved acting, and I really loved set construction, and I was not really into sewing. I hadn't entered my, realm at until I was a senior My sewing origin story is that I was cast in a play where I was sitting backstage, in between scenes, and I'd gotten my dress all wrinkled, and the head of the department saw me and told me to go iron my dress before I went back on stage, and I told him that I had never used an iron before, and he got miffed at me, and he told me that I wasn't gonna be able to work in the scene shop like I wanted to on the next production. I was gonna work in the costume shop with him, and he was gonna teach me how to use an iron, and he was gonna teach me how to sew. And I was just like, "Okay, well, I will accept my punishment and spend time, in the costume shop instead of in the scene shop." And so then I loved it, and then it went from there. I was a senior in college, so I didn't know what to do next. So, almost as a joke, applied to the Yale School of Drama for their costume internship program. And so they only take one student a year or one intern a year. And and for some reason they picked me. So I really went from not knowing how to sew, in that one college setting to learning to sew at Yale. So I have sort of this like Ivy League beginning, and then that led me to a master's degree in costume production, which led me to sewing for Broadway. This is 5 years from I don't know how to use an iron, and so I was a milliner for Broadway shows, and then eventually left New York and started my own, couture bridal business, and now I teach custom sewing to people who sew for themselves. All of that was about individuals. I never learned to sew clothes from commercial patterns. So I have a little bit different perspective. And so that's why I think I'm a little bit uniquely qualified
Mhm.
to teach this type of sewing to people who love to sew for themselves. Um, so that's kind of my maker story. But I love woodworking. In the middle there was 9 years where I worked as a, custom picture frame. Like, I would make picture frames for museums, like hand carving and gold gilding and all that stuff. So, yeah, that's my story quickly. But, yeah, I am doing a Sewiversary blog series right now, and I should have all the pieces out by the time this airs, telling all the details and showing stories, pictures of all that.
I've been following that process that you've been sharing on your Sewiversary, and it's been a lot of fun. So if
Mhm.
anyone, would love to see some great pictures of Brooksian in all sorts of crazy situations, you can check that out. Like, I always get a big laugh, and I love how you present it, and I love how you share what you have going on and that lightness, and it's really fun to watch. Thank you so much for sharing. It's interesting to me, while you were speaking, I was thinking about this. I was thinking, so couture sewing is sort of it's not an antiquated thing, but it certainly has its roots in our history, right? Sewing for one body as opposed to having a
Yeah.
pattern for multiple bodies. And then making picture frames for museums with carving and gilding and all of that certainly feels like an antiquated sort of skill, right? Something from our past.
Mhm. Yeah.
Are you drawn to the ancient techniques? Is there like a base, like, draw for you there?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I would say yes. I like research. I like, history. I like, the crafts that take time.
Yeah,
I'm really trying to I'd like to try to steer my life away from the like condense and consume and make it all as quick as possible. I understand how efficiency could be very helpful, but I kind of always steer away from the efficient method versus the like take your time and do
right.
it slow. I mean, it's all an exercise in patience.
Yeah,
Um and so practicing that patience while doing something that you really enjoy
yeah,
helps you have patience in your real life too. So I
yeah,
think that, having these jobs, even if there is like theater, when you're sewing for theater, it is sort of a go, 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 there's a hectic pace to it, which I have stepped back from. And so, but it's still all this like slow, take your time, get it right the first time so you don't have
Yeah.
to go back and do a big repair or
Mhm.
anything. And then also the similarity when you were talking, the similarity between the like designing a wedding dress for a person. Um, when I was doing the frame job, so the frame job came before the wedding dresses, but I still see them as very similar in that the frames we made were designed specifically for each piece of art. Most of the time we would get, a specific piece of art and then we would design for it, and that's how I feel about the wedding dresses too, like, it's about the person,
Mhm.
it's not about the dress, and it's about the art, it's not about the frame, but this thing that you get to embellish is supposed to bring out the beauty in the person or the piece of art or whatever. I knew when I wanted to start making things for myself, when I became an entrepreneur or whatever, is that I didn't want to make something and then try to sell it to someone. I wanted to make something for someone. And not only as a business perspective, it's real great to have someone say yes before you've made the thing, to go ahead and like sign that contract and get the thing going before you invest a bunch of time making something that you don't know if it's going to sell. But also the whole making process is inspired already because it's this person, it's about this person.
Right.
And so, like, I don't consider myself a designer. A lot of people call me a fashion designer, and I don't identify with fashion or with designer. I know that they're trying to say the right thing. They don't know what to call me. I don't know what to call me. A maker is really the
Yeah.
best, word, but that's confusing to people too. So,
Right.
but I don't consider myself a designer because I work for individuals and I'm really just designing for and with them. Like they help me through that process. I like to make the thing. My degree is in costume production, not costume design, which is
Yeah.
something I sought out. Like the designer reads the plays and decides what everyone's going to wear and maybe is even or a fashion designer, is expressing their own um, you know, whatever to the world. I don't have anything to express. I wanna help you express.
Right.
I wanna help you learn how to make clothes that you wanna wear. And yeah, and then design just
Mhm.
kinda comes naturally if you know what you wanna wear.
Roxanne, can I just say, I understand what you're saying because I definitely identify as a maker, right? And I also teach sewing
Mhm.
in a different vein to some degree than what you teach, but I have the same end goal in mind. I don't want to necessarily create patterns for
Yeah.
people to use. I want to create basic patterns for people to use because that's the vein I teach in. And then I want them to make it their own. I want to teach them how to make it their own. And so like I also do graphic design and I do several different things, but I always work best when I have a problem to solve, right? And the problem is, like, not nearly
Yes.
as beautiful of a way of speaking it as you just spoke it, as, like, you're enhancing the artwork in front of you, right? And so I'm gonna
Yeah.
change my language around that because I love how you're saying that, but I like to have parameters, and then I can explode within those parameters, right? But if I don't have parameters,
Absolutely.
I can't think of anything to do, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what to do with this." But, like so every night I tell my little boy a story, and I'm like, "Give me 3 things."
Mhm.
And so he has to choose 3 things, and they can be like a shoe, a dragon, and a penny, right? Whatever. And then I'll develop a story, a bedtime story for him
Mhm.
from those 3 things. But if he didn't give me those 3 things, I'd be like, "Cute. Huh. I have no idea. I have no idea what to tell you. I can't think of
Yeah,
any
yeah, that's
forget it."
exactly
Yeah.
people look through my, like, bridal portfolio and they're like, "Oh, these designs, you
Mhm.
designed some amazing dresses," and I'm like, "Well, Deborah designed that one and Lila Rose designed that one." I just facilitate, and yeah, it's those parameters. So when I meet with a bride, the first thing we do is just list a bunch of adjectives And then as we're going through, I'm helping her figure out design things. We can come back to we're like, oh, okay, well, do you like this sleeve or this sleeve? And if it's like, I don't know, I love them both, we can go back to the adjectives and say, oh, well, does this fit, that feminine look you were looking for, or whatever, like it helps you to whittle down. I like to start with all the ideas, like every idea we can possibly think of. Let's just bam all that in there and then start whittling away. Like, nope, 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 until you're done at the end. And then you've got still probably too many ideas, but they can help, get it all together, and in the end, it's perfect. That's another thing as far as how I work, and that's unique from for not sewing with, commercial patterns or sewing in the way that you're saying, where you have a base pattern and you, can change it up, is that have to sketch a dress for the bride, before we start making the dress so we can communicate to each other. But it's not dead set on that. Like the end is almost always different than we thought it was going to be when we got started.
Yeah.
But it's better. It's not that there were these like, oh, we made a mistake or something. It was that we just kept evolving, and the whole process just evolves and lays itself out for you if you just, like, set it in motion,
Mhm.
And so, it's one of those things where you do a whole lot of prep, but then you let the whole process, speak to you, and, like,
Yeah.
if you listen if you listen to the as far as design, yes, but also in construction. I mean, that's what I teach in my classes as well. Is like you just have to take it one step at a time. We are only at the, pattern making stage. We do not need to think about seam finishes, when we get to this
Right.
finishing the seam after we've had the basic fitting, and wants to start at the end.
Yeah.
But there's so much before that, as far as, like, prep to get you to that end really successfully.
Yeah. And I think it's such a good correlation to life, right? The idea of like make your plans and then let them
Yes.
go and follow the path and see where it
Yes.
takes you. And that you're very likely to end up someplace much more beautiful than you could have imagined. But it's good to have that plan to get you started and then just let it go. I think that's beautiful. I've been trying to do
Yes.
that in my business as well because I've got like 17 journals and I can be very much a planner of things. And I'm trying to just do that because it gives me a lot of joy. It gives me a lot of peace. But then, like, let it go and see where things go and let it take you.
And things take time. So if you, like, set this plan and you set this deadline, you don't know what you're getting yourself into. So that deadline is really, you have to remember that it was self-imposed and that it is editable, and that it's better to not just try to, I mean, I guess in some situations you need to meet the deadline. The bride is getting married on a specific day or whatever. But if it's just like within the business, I have things on my like top of to-do list for 2018 that I am still wanting to get to, like, because I have so many ideas for new classes,
Yeah.
but I still have to take care of all the old classes. I'm nurturing my current students all the time, and things just take time, I think
Mhm.
is the main thing, is like to have patience, to be give yourself grace for those deadlines that you don't meet because you didn't know what you were talking about when you set the deadline. Like, because it's gonna take longer than you thought. If you're like
Always.
me, if you're like
Right.
me, I guess a lot of people are really good at being speedy, and they really like to get to the finish line and all that. And I take a lot of time, just because
Mhm.
I'm very DIY. I'm totally DIY. Like, I am a one woman business. We're doing everything on my terms, but
Right.
it's which is fun because, like, I've worked with teams and I've done all that before, and I like doing the whole thing by myself. I could absolutely hire a video team to help me make the videos for my online courses, but I don't work like that. Like, I couldn't work like that. Like, it's the opposite of how my class would run, because how my course is it just teaches the process of custom sewing, from start to finish. Like you learn design, you learn to how to make patterns, you learn how to fit, you learn how to sew. And so it can be for a total beginner, but from the back end, me making these videos, what I'm doing is once we get to the point where you've made your tools and you've drafted your patterns, I I take 3 garments from start to finish, and then to inspire you to mix and match things from each of them to make your own garment. So, in the pattern making section, we learn how to make all kinds of different patterns. So, you can come up with whatever style you wanted to, but as far as finishing techniques, like in the intro skirt class, I'll teach, 3 different waistline finishes, 4 different hems, 3 different zippers, 4 different seam finishes, different fabrics. Some has lining, some doesn't have, pockets or whatever. So of all those, you get a demo of me doing it while making myself some clothes, which is almost the only time that I get to make some clothes for myself is when I'm doing it on
Mhm.
camera. And I like to take my time. So it would be a disservice for everyone if I had a camera crew trying to like wade through this process with me because it's a lot of just me standing around and thinking and, like,
Yeah,
I need that alone time when I'm making clothes for myself and all that, so you get the process, but it's gonna take time because I'm the one who's climbing up on the table and turning on the camera and and climbing back on the table and then pressing record and then doing the demo and then going back and taking off the set, but that's how I wanna do it. I
mhm,
like solo sewing. By this time in my career, which is my 26th sewiversary, I've gotten to the point where I can, just do what I want to do.
yeah.
And so it takes time, but it's it's good.
That's beautiful. I can completely relate because I also do all of my own things. I do my own, like for a long time, I had a step ladder with a broom across it, and my camera was like
Yeah.
bungee corded to the broom to be coming down to my table. And then I
Yeah.
would realize I forgot to hit play. And now I've already sewn the piece, and now I've got to redo the piece and sew it again because I didn't get it recorded, like all
Mhm.
those things. Definitely, I can understand that process. Um, and I can understand
Yep.
wanting to not be pressured by having a for hire crew there to get through something more quickly. Like, that
Mhm.
makes a lot of sense. What prompted you to wanna do online courses?
So I am someone so you heard a little bit about my educational background, and, so it wasn't until I had already had a career sewing for celebrities on Broadway that um I never said as a hobby, it was always as a profession,
Right.
and so it wasn't until, um I can't think of, like, when, as far as a date, it would have been that I, like, cracked open my first commercial pattern. I was like, "Oh, this is great, like, I need a coat, like, look, somebody already made a coat. Oh my gosh, this is a neat thing, like, I will just take this pattern and then I'll make myself a coat," and I remember it was a Colette pattern, it was 10/23, that's my birthday, and I was like, "This is gonna be amazing," and then I unfolded all the tissue, and then I saw all these lines and charts, and it was nothing like I wanted to do. Like, I was just folded it up, it was not inspiring for me. I didn't know where the person was in the pattern. I didn't even know how to compare myself. I don't like a comparison process where I'm trying to figure out someone else's work and where do I jump into that process and where does my body fit into this pattern? But also just like anytime there's a whole bunch of numbers or a whole bunch of charts or lines or whatever, like I shut down. And so then I realized like, oh, this is not I don't like this at all. Like if I would have been introduced to sewing in that way,
Yeah.
I would have just tossed it away immediately.
Mhm.
I would have been like, "Okay, that was cool, move on." And so I folded that pattern up. It's still in my drawer. I have like a drawer of like, maybe a dozen patterns or something because people give them to me or they come to crafty courses or whatever. but that I never made that coat. And, but then that's sort of when I realized that there was this home sewing community, and I wanted to be a part of that, and so I was like, "Okay, well, I'll try to jump in." And everything was just a little different. Like, I would find myself, like, someone would give some tip, and I'm like, "Yeah, yeah," and I'm like, "Wait, no, what? Why would you do that?" Like, "Oh, really? Oh, no. Oh, that's how you do it? Oh, no." Like, it was just, like, not what I had done, and so I love that commercial patterns get people sewing. I love that there are so many people who love to use them.
Mhm,
I am not one of them, and I realize that there are probably people like me
mhm,
who have never heard of like what I'm doing. And so I started doing research and I started to look for, books and stuff on to show how I learned to sew at Yale. And I couldn't find anything like it really. And
yeah,
I was like, "Oh gosh, not only do I have this, like, knowledge, but I want to share it." Like,
mhm,
I want people to see how fun what I do is. And since people who make clothes for themselves are making clothes for an individual,
mhm,
it seems to make more sense than following something that was mass produced and then designed for multiple people. And then, you do these factory
mhm,
finishes or whatever. Um, it just I didn't wanna learn that, and I didn't wanna learn full bust adjustments, and I didn't wanna learn sway back adjustments, like, I don't wanna learn it, it's not interesting to me. I've never had to learn that because when you have the person right in front of you, it does not matter how slopey their shoulder is compared to someone else's shoulder.
right,
Just do the shoulder that's right there in front of you. And so, especially if you are just sewing for you, then you only had to learn that one body. You only have to learn one shoulder slope. And so, anyway, I wanted to start sharing this with the world. And at the time, so this is 2014 was when I made my first e course.
yeah,
And in 2014, I was working at the frame shop. So my day job was that I was, in my overalls, hand carving and sanding stuff. And then my side gig was the wedding dress business that I worked out of my house. So I would just do one dress a year and um and blog about it. It's all on my blog. Every
yeah,
wedding dress I've made since 2009. I blogged the process. And so the frame shop job one day while my husband was on vacation kind of crashed and burned. Like we had a shop meeting that sort of changed everything for everyone. And so while my husband was on a trip with his friend, um, I put in my 2 weeks notice for my job. So I was like, "I've got to come up with a new job before my husband comes home." This is 2014 when e-courses were really new. I found a 6-week e-course on how to make a 6-week e-course, and so I signed up for that, and
yeah,
I said, "I'm just gonna figure out how to teach sewing online." And the class that I made in 2014 was skirt skills. And that's the intro class that I still offer. I've fully revised it since then, but it's still the same core class. And then now I have follow up classes that once you learned all the basics by doing the easiest garment, which is skirts, and it's a foundational garment, then you can move on to pants and tops and dresses. And then that's a flat pattern. I wanna teach draping classes, I wanna teach hand sewing classes. I have so many more classes that I wanna teach as well, but it takes a lot of time, and there's a lot of when you're a one-woman show, there's a lot of back end stuff. My day to day, there's very little making, there's a
mhm,
whole lot of writing. Like, I tell people when they come over,
mhm,
like, "People think my job is sewing." My job is writing because I do my blog posts and then all my e-courses, they're not live. their just videos. And so I've written, each one, and each course is about 16 hours complete. And so um I've written all these books, but they just happen to be in video form, right? Because I want to interact with the people and truly make it custom, just like one pattern doesn't fit anybody. I want my students to interact with me because I can offer them so much more about them as an individual
Yeah.
if I can interact with you as an individual.
Yeah.
Not that you can't just go through the class and be a success, but I would love to work with you. And so that's really where my comfort zone and where my fun is like, is working with my students each
Mhm.
day. And so
Mhm.
every morning I'm usually working with my students online. And then the afternoon is what else I can get done.
And now a word from our sponsor. Today's episode is sponsored by Howl at the Loom. Jasmine with Howl at the Loom is a local weaver, dyer, and teacher. And by local, I mean she's local to northern Lower Michigan. She's passionate about sharing her love of textiles. She's also passionate about locally grown and processed fibers, about upcycled materials, and about sharing what she knows with other people. Not only that, but she's really pivotal in bringing the Tip of the Mint Fiber Fair here to northern Lower Michigan. And for that, I am eternally grateful. I would love it if you would check out her website, howlattheloom.com. HOWLATTHELOOM.com. Do you still do custom bridal wear?
Good question. Yes and no. So when the pandemic hit, I had a second mock-up fitting ready for my bride Claire that we were going to meet on March 17th, 2020, before I start cutting her wedding dress fabric. And everything got canceled.
Mm-hmm.
That dress is still in mock-up form with a bunch of
Oh,
fabric purchased. And she's married now, and she says maybe they'll have a wedding someday or whatever, but did not make any pandemic dresses. And I also in 2020, we moved. My husband and I moved out to the country in the middle of nowhere. And we've got acres, and we've got a future studio space for me. So right now I have a future studio, which is at this point a nice little 1910 house that we have gutted. And so, but it's at the gutted stage. It's not at the like you can go in and not get dirty stage. Getting that project again, I'm slow. Getting that project done is gonna take a unique combo of money and health and time
yeah,
to get the studio ready. So I'm in a temporary studio now. So I am also just sort of treating this as a time to take a break from brides. I
yeah.
will want to get back into it when I'm in my new studio, but I don't really want to right now. Like I've got so much other stuff. Another reason why I'm taking a pause on brides is that in some ways I do the brides for the sewing community. In some ways, I choose my brides for the blog,
Yeah.
because I'm gonna be telling this story out to the world, and I do want to attract sewing people because I do want to teach them a way to sew if that is something that they're interested in. But I also, like, really want to get out all this educational content that's in my head, and I'm a patient person, but there's never enough time.
There never is. I can, again, completely relate to your process and that just this morning, I was woken up in the middle of the night, really, like 4 a.m., with all these ideas for things I wanted to create and things I wanted to make for my business. And definitely, I understand the challenge of having an online business and how it then takes up all of your time, more or less, and you're not making other
Yeah.
things for yourself, right? Because I completely relate to the idea
Mhm.
that the only clothes you have are the ones that you're making on film. That's exactly my
Yes.
experience as well,
The
and so how do we find room for that? And, like, do you miss making just for the act of making? And do you have anything that you do make outside of your business and your sewing?
Good questions. Yes, the dressmaker has no clothes is what I always tell people. I don't have any new clothes. I haven't purchased clothes.
Yeah.
Um, I don't like I don't like sizing. I don't like sizing to be a part of my life. And I have made this little world where it doesn't have to exist. That's one of the things that I want people to experience when they
Mhm.
take my class is like this little world where um you don't have to compare yourself to how much amount of sway your back is to somebody else's, and there's not someone who's saying you're a 4 or a 14 or a 44, like, none of that is a thing, and so, uh that's so but I was talking about shopping. It's like so I don't like to go to stores, like, where I have to, like, look at a rack of the same thing and see the numbers. I'm not a numbers person. Um, and so I will shop at thrift stores because things are organized by
Yeah.
color, and you just put it on, and if it fits, great, and if it doesn't, then it doesn't. Mostly, I just have clothes that are I either made on camera or via a pattern that I made on camera. Like after I've done the whole process online, then I'll make myself another. Like I'm wearing a pair of jeans right now that I made in my pants class. But in the pants class, I made them out of hot pink corduroy. And so you watched me make the whole thing in hot pink corduroy on camera. But then right after I finished the class, I was like, I need some pants because I had worked on this pants class for years, um, because well, this is gonna go on a different tangent. The way that I teach, um, sewing is by making your own patterns, and what I originally thought when I was going to make my classes was that so there are 3 different ways that you can make a custom pattern, and there are 3 different garments that you can make. So, the 3 different ways that you can make a custom pattern are flat pattern making,
Mhm.
draping, or, taking something that already exists, like a commercial pattern or a finished garment or something, and starting with that. So, the draping and pattern making starts with the person, and then the other one kind of starts with not the person, and then you alter it to the person. Anyway, I'm interested really in, the draping and the pattern making, and the flat pattern, and they all seem to go well with a garment. So, skirts, I think, translate really well to making a pattern via flat pattern. Tops would translate really well for draping, and draping is actually my favorite way to make clothes. And then for pants, I was going to teach how to take a pair of pants that you already love and then make a duplicate of it.
Yeah.
And so I had taught skirt skills and I taught this flat pattern making. And then I was getting ready to start teaching the pants class. And I'm asking my students like what they want. And they were like, please don't tell us to get a pair of pants that already fit. And then because we don't have a pair of pants that already fit, right? That's why we're
Right.
taking this course. And
Right.
so they're like, okay. So I mean, I hadn't made the class yet. I was just polling. And then they were like, no, we love flat pattern. Teach us how to do flat pattern. Well, the thing is, I've never seen a flat pattern like pants making system or skirt or tops. I've never seen any like systems to create the blocks that I liked. And so I had to invent them myself. So for skirt skills, I invented a whole different way to make a block, and it only takes information from your body or your personal preferences. There's zero fashion formulas, there's no chart for ease, there's no anything. Like we just take you and we map you. And it's very logical. It's very easy to see how you can get a custom fit. It's very intuitive, but yet the way you usually learn is to get a flat pattern making book designed for a fashion textbook. So it was designed to be made for someone to mass produce something, but they will teach you ways that, well, you can plug in one of your numbers here and one of your numbers here, but there's always going to be a this is 2 inches for everyone, and this is an add a quarter and add a whatever. What does all that mean? I don't know. I have a literal master's diploma of pretty much pattern making, and those systems don't make perfect sense to me. Like, there's some stuff in there I can understand, but there's a lot of stuff that I don't understand. And so I don't want to teach something that I don't understand.
Right.
And I don't work well when I don't understand something. Like, I don't blindly follow anything. Instead, I'll research something for 7 years and then figure it out. And so that's what happened. It came pretty naturally for me because I was already thinking about it as being a flat patterning project. With pants, I thought it was gonna be a piece of cake, and, I worked on it for 7 years. I ran beta sessions. I had to invent a new way to
Mhm.
make pants that do not involve any standard measurements. It's only information from your body. So to understand how each line and curve corresponds with your anatomy was my challenge. And to
Yeah.
have something that would work for anyone in my, like the way that I sewed, there's no size range, there's no like plus size because there is no size. You
Mhm.
can take size totally away from it. And so it's been really fun. So this year was the first time that I ran the first non-beta session, like the session where I think, okay, I think I did it. I think I finally solved this puzzle of how to create a easily understandable system where someone can use only their body and then come up with any kind of pant from a very relaxed fit that's almost just like the skirt, but with a crotch in it,
Yeah.
to custom fit non-stretch jeans. And so it's all I learned that pants fit is a spectrum. I learned way more than I ever wanted to know about pants. I'm not even all that interested in pants, but it's what I've dedicated the past I mean, it's not like I was working on it every minute for 7 years, but it was always the project. Like, I would run the class as a beta test at least once a year to get new people to try just the ideas that I had been thinking about, and they would know that, like, I don't know what I'm talking about yet, like, I'm just trying to figure it all out, and so I think it's also fun for my students to be part of that process
Oh,
where,
yeah.
Brooks is inventing something new, and we get to be a part of it.
Yeah.
So now right now, I'm, at the point where I feel like I've got a cohesive, like, 3 core classes, and so now I feel like I can start jumping in and really teach that draping class that I wanted to teach 6 years ago because draping is what I really love, and
Yeah.
so I've made the an ebook on how to make a custom dress form,
Mhm.
and so that would be the equivalent of the block that you make for flat patterning
Right.
is is like a custom dress form, but one that it's flat. You can fit it in a drawer instead of having a life-size replica of yourself. But I like the 3D. I'm a 3D person. I'm a hands-on, let the fabric tell you what it wants person. So
Yeah.
all the flat pattern has been a good challenge for me too, because I also loved it, but I
Yeah.
always hated all the charts and the math and that kind of stuff. I can follow those directions and plot point A and plot point F and plot point A to 1 or whatever, but I don't know what I'm doing and I don't know what I'm gonna get at the end, and it's all guesswork. And so I like to have the control of like doing the whole thing from start to finish and just seeing how it goes.
Right? I wanna jump in here and say, when you first released your book on the do-it-yourself dress form, I immediately bought it,
hmm
and I absolutely agree with you about removing the sizing, and that's exactly why I sew too, and that's why I teach sewing because it allows human to just be a human, and you no longer have to worry about fitting or not fitting. And when I go into a store, which is so infrequent, I'm always like shocked at the sizes, and I'm always shocked at like how to figure out where I
Yeah.
fit in the sizes. And then I'm always somewhat discouraged by the sizes. And it's like, why would I be discouraged with this body that I walked in the store loving and I walked out of the store hating? Right. And it's like, that's so
Yeah.
arbitrary and ridiculous. So I'm completely on board with you on all of that. So I bought your do-it-yourself dress form, probably because your cute body was online in your undergarments, and I felt like I already adored you, and here you are, like, showing us how it is, and I'm like, "Yes!" So I bought it immediately, and then my life shifted, and I've gone through divorce and other things where I needed to refocus what I was doing, and I was thinking about that dress form book today in preparation for our call because I haven't done anything
Yep.
with it. I have a studio that I'm just beginning to put together.
Mhm.
This is so frustrating. I like this is true confession time. I because of this autoimmune thing that I have going on, I'm on steroids, and so my body has changed. And I'm like, I don't really want to make a custom dress form for the body I have right now. I'm gonna wait until my body's different. And I'm like,
Mhm.
"Tina, that is such bullshit. Like, you know better than this, right? How many times have I taught my
Uh-huh.
students to work with the body you have right now, love the body you have right now, and here I am, this little hypocrite sitting in my kitchen who's like, "I'm gonna wait to make the dress form until my body's a little different." So I'm like, I'm confessing it right now,
Yes.
right here on the podcast, and I wanna say that it's crap. And there you go.
I can help you with that also. Yes. Well, also, so we're both in this transitional studio
Yep.
situation and not really wanting to get into permanent projects, which is totally fine. Um, but also just to give you that extra nudge, one of the reasons why I love padding dress forms the way that I teach in the book is that you can change it. Like it
Oh,
changes with you because as long as your dress form is smaller than you everywhere, which is the only requirement,
right.
really, you can keep adjusting the padding. Like I feel like it's better to have one that's way smaller than you than anywhere near your measurements
Okay.
because then it's totally customizable. The more padding you use, the more customizable you can have. I'm always redoing I didn't make a custom dress for myself until you see me making it in that book. I'm always the last one to get something, but for my brides, they're almost always like changing shape from the time because we usually work together for 8 months or so and some brides will, stress eat and some brides will lose weight. Everyone's body fluctuates. And so that's not a problem. You just take off some padding or add some padding, move it around because there's nothing sewn. It's all just pinned on.
Okay.
And so I've got my dress form here, like looking at me right here with some fabric draped on it and a necklace.
You've inspired
But
me. All right, because you know what? One of the things I think might be, a problem with me is that I tend to think that things are permanent, right? So once I've done it, I don't ever wanna go back to it
yeah.
and redo it. So I have this permanency in my head. And so for you to inspire me
Mm.
here to say, "No, it's supposed to be fluid, and it's okay that my body is what it is right now, and let it be."
Yeah, it's my philosophy is almost always the opposite. I look at everything as reversible and adjustable.
Yeah.
Through every step of sewing, that's one of the things I love about sewing is people see things in the middle of the process as mistakes, and I don't see you can always go back, like, that's a gift. That's
Mhm.
like, you got to try something, and you got to learn that it didn't work before you got to the end. Wonderful. Like, you can just go and change it, and at that step or go back and so I do a lot of basting. I do a lot of cautious prep. And I take a long time when I sew, but in the end, it's like I remember my husband once. This is one of the best things he said to me is that when I'm almost down to the wire on a wedding dress or whatever, and I'm wondering like, is it gonna be good? Is it whatever? And he told me he's like, you haven't failed yet. You always get to the end and you always make it work. And so it's not a failure if at the end it doesn't have that whatever you were worried about. Or but I guess I also have a different perspective of what things look like when they are complete. Like, I think because clothing that we wear mostly comes with factory finishes, and the home sewing pattern industry also, shares those kinds of finishes.
Mhm,
The result seems to be that the goal is to make it look like it came from a store.
mhm.
Um, from my background, I I know differently. Like, I would be so sad if someone thought that something I made came from a store. I don't look at it coming from the store as a great example of what good sewing should look like.
Right.
I I want to see those mistakes. I wanna see that wonky stitch. That wonky stitch is way more interesting than that one that looks like it came from a factory. I teach a hand sewing class, at Camp Workroom Social.
Mm.
It's always about changing people's perspective about hand sewing. I remember my students saying, like, "Oh, I love hand sewing, but I don't know how to get my stitches, like, perfect and even." And I'm like, "Why would you want to do that?" Like, if you wanna get them perfect and even, there's a machine over there, that
Yeah.
you could do that in a second. But if you want it to have
Mhm,
the mark of the maker, if you want it to have a softer, I don't know, some love like built into it, like,
mhm.
that's what I love about hand sewing is that it couldn't be done by a machine. If you look at it, you know that, like, a human being touched it. And so I rarely, even my wedding dresses or anything, like, I leave those wonky stitches in because those are what's beautiful to
Yeah.
me. Um, so I guess it also just depends on your perspective of what your goal is in the end. And if your goal is to make something that looked like it came from a factory and you are not a factory, then you probably have to work harder than me as a couturier who just kind of lets it go and like,
Yeah.
I don't see the way that I sew as being harder than the way that other people sew. I think it's just different,
Yeah.
and different is good. Like, different is what needs to be celebrated. So I
Mhm.
hope that people will learn that they can, like, mix and match what they love. Like, they're in sewing, there's process people and product people, the people who sew because they love the act of sewing. And then there's people who sew because they love to have the thing
Mhm.
that that they made, and it was made by them, and now they get to wear it and show it out into the world, and those are both great ways. But if you are a product person and you want to be a process person, it's possible that the process that you're doing just isn't the one for you.
Mhm.
And almost every little step, from pinning to cutting to making your own patterns or not, has alternates. And
Right.
so if you're like, "I hate cutting," you should talk to me because cutting is so fun. Like, that's my favorite part. And I bet I do a different thing you do, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
so I hope that people get inspired to just explore
Yeah.
their options. And when something doesn't feel right, you don't have to do that thing. You just got to figure out what the other thing is.
Right, right. I love that. So it speaks to the idea that I have about mastering your craft as well, right? So the way to master is
Mm,
to be a little more patient, bring it a little slower, and explore what works
uh-huh.
for you, right? Find what your flow is, what's right for you, and take your time with it. I love that.
Yeah. And the thing is also is that I mean, I have a literal master's degree. I could look on my wall and someone has told me that I'm a master. But guess what? Like, I'm never gonna master this. Like, I
Yeah.
just spent 6 years thinking about pants. And so it's like that's also what is great about it is
Yeah.
that I'm never going to be bored. I am always going to be learning
Mhm.
new things and am always going to be evolving. So it's even though I had some deadline in 2018, I'm different now.
So what drives you as a maker? What deep down inside of Roxanne, like what is her driving force to be a maker from a very young age, as you said?
Well, my story is likely a little different because I have always been a maker by profession. And so, in a lot of ways, what drives me to be a maker is my paycheck. This is how I make my living. I always knew that I wanted to make a living making art. Even before I knew how to sew, like I wanted to try to figure out what that was. And so I started with theater, and I haven't done any theater since 2004, but theater was a huge part of the beginning of my career. And so it really is what keeps driving me was that transition of learning how to sew for individuals and then trying to become part of the sewing community, which learned a different process. And
Right.
so just me researching and trying to fit in and then realizing that I don't wanna fit in and then realizing that I want people to come with me. Come with me and Tina. We have a little bit different way to do things and to offer that sizeless experience. And the same thing for the brides. Like, I
Yeah.
want them to come and just have an individual experience. You know, when you work in theater, it's never fit mo I mean, sometimes you'll have, like, the Rockettes, they are chosen for their size and their talent, but also for their specific shape because they're supposed to look this certain way. That is rare. Usually,
Mhm.
actors come in all shapes and sizes because they're playing real characters, real life characters. And so, um, I want people to see that perspective and to look at designing clothes for themselves as who is the character that I am in my life?
Mhm.
What would I design for this character that is me in this play that is my life? Like what am I doing today that's for real? Not that I'm going to be walking on a catwalk or whatever, or maybe you have a fancy event or something, but just coming to it from a individual perspective and trying to create this world that I am learning to enjoy of where there isn't this size
Yeah.
situation. Now I know that out in the real world, you're not going to be able to avoid it, but at least when you come into my classroom, we can get away from it for a little bit. I can't believe I'm about to talk about Schitt's Creek on a podcast. But there's a show called Schitt's Creek. The very beginning, it's hard to get into because the characters evolve. So at the beginning, all the characters are terrible. So if you started watching it and gave up like I did, go
Exactly.
back like I did because it's a really good show.
Okay.
And one of the things so watched afterwards, I watched the little documentary about the making of the show, and the guy who plays David mentioned something that I hadn't realized about the show, but afterwards I was like, "Yes, that is something that I loved about it." Um, was that in the show there's no homophobia. It's just never mentioned, and so there are homosexual characters in the show, but they are never treated
Right.
how they are in true life. And
Right.
so I want that kind of experience when you come to my classroom is that you
Mhm.
just sort of forget that no one is judging you and
Yeah.
no one is, treating you
Mhm.
like you're different or anything else, is that everybody can just be and we can just get away from that at least while we're in the classroom or while we're watching the TV
Yeah.
show or whatever. So that we have a better armor to go out into life and
Mhm.
see how it could be in the
Right.
future when we don't have to have everything mass produced or whatever, or when you have your own wardrobe that you just make for yourself and that
Right.
you don't have to go to stores and do any of that kind of stuff anymore.
I was actually gonna ask you, like, what you hope your students leave your class with, or what you hope your brides
Mm.
leave that experience with, and I think you just touched on it, this sense of, like, just being
Yeah.
okay. Not only okay, but, like, perfectly good with who they are, right? Like, that's not even an issue, it's not
Yeah,
even on
yeah.
the table.
Yeah, instead we get to just have the fun part of, like, doing the sewing or making the clothes and we can do together and that you can grow on. I've had, at least 1, no, 2, 3 of my brides have then had such a good experience with the wedding dress process that they have become my students. You're gonna be my friend by the end of this.
Yeah.
just like you. Now we're best friends and we're
We
just
are.
on this podcast and we just met
Yeah.
today.
I can't wait to go on vacation together or something. Like, it's gonna be so exciting, our future.
I know.
Yeah. Tell us what your daily life looks like. How do you fill your days? And do you have a good whatever this means, do you have a good work-life balance, whatever that is?
um, it depends. My day is always different. So I design my processes for myself, how I work with brides, how I create e-courses and how I get through each work day. And it usually starts with seeing what questions my students have,
Mhm.
because my support is ongoing. And then the afternoon is going to be whatever I have time for as far as, I mean, it's almost always just like boring computer stuff because I'm a solopreneur. And so I do a lot of writing. If I'm in production, my work life balance is tough because it takes so long. Like it never goes as quickly as I thought it was going to be. So, like, I assume like I'm going to spend 4 months. That sounds like a long time to spend every day, like, filming an e-course. No, it took 9 months, and then afterwards, you just kind of move into a new phase of like, "Okay, what's all the stuff that I neglected while I was doing that thing?" I'm always feeling like I can't quite I'll write a to-do list, and then I'll get, like, the bare minimum done, to whereas I wanted to get more done. Feel like I'm always kind of chasing the bare minimum. But, that's what needs to happen is I just try to prioritize and I design my day based on what I think I can handle. And so
Mhm.
like even if I said like I need to get this done, today and it really doesn't need to get done today, if that's not something I'm feeling, I have an unending list of
Yeah.
things that also needs to be done. And so if there's one of those that I have the mental capacity to do at that time, then that's the time I need to mark that off the list. Because another time it's going to be switched. And so I do try to listen to what I'm capable of handling at the particular moment.
I, for the longest time, would have this deep sense of failure is not quite the right word, but like I was constantly behind, right? I'm constantly behind. I can't get through this to do list. I can't do all the things I want to do because I,
Yeah.
like you, have built my life and I've built my business around what I love doing. And so, like, I should be enjoying this, right? I mean, my goodness, there's
Yeah.
so many people who live lives and they go to work that they can't stand. And like, how fortunate are we that we've
Yes.
chosen something that we actually love to do, but then to feel so stressed that I can't seem to accomplish all I need to accomplish. And often, like you mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
self imposed deadlines. Um, Nobody's put that
Yeah.
deadline on me but me.
They are flexible.
Right, right. And so I finally, for a while, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, I worked in a graphic design company. And it was very regimented how they did things, right? So, like, you would come in the morning and you'd have time slots for everything. And you would pick your jobs, and your jobs that you chose would have been assigned an amount of time that they would take. And you had to pick jobs that fit how much time you were working that day, right? You didn't pick any jobs beyond that. You didn't pick any
Mhm.
jobs lower than that. You just picked what would fit. And they didn't always work that way, right? But there was just an ease to it. And there was like such a sense of satisfaction because I would be like, all right, I'm going to do this job, and this job. Adored that about it. I adored that sense of like, I've accomplished what I'm supposed to accomplish today. And for the most part, when you have that
Mhm.
little time container, you kind of fit into it. You know what I mean? Maybe it's not this perfect project in the end,
Mhm.
but you've created something that, you know how it is. We're kind of like water, right? We fill the container we have with our space. And so I've started doing that in my business where on my to do list, I'll estimate how long something might take me, which I'm often wrong about, but I try it. I'll estimate how long something might take me. And
Mhm.
then when I pick what I'm going to do that day, I try to see, like, okay, well, you have 7 hours to work, 8 hours to work, whatever, and you've chosen 24 hours worth of things. How's that going to work out for you? Like,
Yeah.
are you gonna be able to do this? And is it gonna feel satisfying in the end? So I've been trying to really match those 2 so that my level of satisfaction and my level of stress, I have more ease, right? I have more ease in my life and more satisfaction. So I totally get that. We have spent the most lovely time here talking with you and hearing about how you
Mhm.
really have designed your life for your personality and you've really designed your life and your business for what lights you up, I would say, and what works for your brain and what works for your body. I would guess that I have several listeners on this podcast who might feel like they don't know where to start in that or they don't know how to do that. And I wonder if you might have any advice for somebody who feels stuck in their life or feels like they can't make a different choice or they can't design their life according to what they would really like to have happen. Wonder if you might just have a little word that you might say to them or something you'd like them to know.
I think especially if we're just talking about, like life gets messy and you can't always control it. But like if we're talking about our making practice and something that we're doing in our free time, whether it's for relaxation or whether it's for I don't, for whatever reason, um, it's just to remember that that is all very flexible and that it is run by you. You are in control of that. And that if you don't feel like you're in control of that, then maybe to look for another way to loosen that up. And a way to do that is to slow down and to not put expectations onto it. I am not a perfectionist. And even though I'm a couturier, I'm not a perfectionist, and I think that is a key to my success. But I do choose quality over quickness, and I do choose enjoyability over efficiency.
Mhm.
And I guess those are both a way of saying it's okay to go slow.
Yeah.
It's kind of imperative, to like
Mhm.
to gain that patience, and so if patience is not your natural thing, it's gonna take practice. Everything takes practice is the other thing. Is like you're not gonna be good at it. You're not gonna be good at things immediately. It's a step by step, it's a long game. This whole thing is a long game.
Mhm.
But you do want to focus on the present moment and not get ahead of yourself. It took your whole life to get you right here, right now. And so you got to just keep working on that and you have to see where it takes you. And it'll probably take you somewhere you didn't expect, but probably someplace
Mhm.
really awesome.
I love that. And I think that really fits into life in general, right? The
Yeah.
idea of taking it slow, seeing where it goes, and changing the small things that you can change in your life if you feel like it's not maybe the vibrant kind of life that you want to have, but like make those small changes. And I think that that can just
Yeah.
explode into something or flow beautifully into something that feeds you. And oh, Roxanne, it's been so much fun. I'm wondering if you can share where people can find you. And we will have all of this in the show notes as well. We'll have links to your website, we'll have links to your e-courses and your book and all of that. But go ahead and let us know how people can follow you and where they can find you.
Awesome. So my name is Brooks Ann Camper, and you can find me at brooksann.com. There's no E in Brooks or Ann, BROOKSANN. That will take you to my bridal website. It will also link you to my sewing school website, and it will also link you to my blog. And you can sign up for my newsletter and stuff like that there. If you're only interested in the, educational stuff, you can go to learnwithbrooksann.com, and I am on Instagram at Brooks and Camper, Camper. And I think those are the places that you can find me, and those places also will have my email address if you want to email me directly, because I would love to hear from you.
Very nice. I have to tell you, I'm very inspired by this call. We have so much in common. The thing that we don't have in common is that I can be fast, so fast,
Mm,
like so
mm.
fast that that I don't always take the time with the things that I know how to do well, right? And so I've been inspired by this call to slow some things down, and I've been exploring that in my own life anyway, and I think that might be part of why I have this autoimmune thing going on, is this like, "Slow it down, lady. Like, you're going way too fast to really enjoy life,"
Yeah.
and so You have inspired me, and I am so grateful to have had this chance to talk to you. Thank you for being here.
Well, I feel grateful to have talked to you too. This was really great. I was super nervous. I just work alone and I don't talk to other human beings that aren't my husband like most weeks. And so it was really great to be invited on the podcast and to talk to my new best friend, Tina.
Excellent. Woo! Well, that's it for our show. What a great time I had talking with Brooksand, and I am so delighted that you got to listen in. I hope you were doing something amazing while you listened, whether that was walking in the sunshine or spinning some yarn or maybe making dinner, whatever that might be. I hope that you are living your most vibrant life and listening to this podcast and finding inspiration by hearing someone else's story. Speaking of inspiration, would you do me a favor? Would you go down to your favorite podcasting app and subscribe to the show? And while you're at it, will you leave me a review? Because I want to inspire other people by the stories that I am loving sharing with you. All right, have the best day. And a final word from our sponsor, Howl at the Loom. I want to thank Howl at the Loom for sponsoring the podcast and the beautiful work that she's doing here in Northern Lorne, Michigan. Work that she's doing for the local fiber fair and the fiber shed that we have here in Northern Michigan, and the work that she's doing as a weaver, a teacher, and a dyer. Check out our website, howlattheloom.com, for information about any of the classes she might be doing in the area. And that's HOWLATTGLOOM.com.